In a crowded community hall on the north side of Chicago, the air smelled of bad coffee, printed paper, and the particular brand of forced warmth that people wear on their faces when they know they are being watched. It was a Saturday matching event, the kind the Department of Children and Family Services hosted 4 times a year, where prospective families came to meet waiting children in a setting that was supposed to feel safe and hopeful. The organizers had tried. There were cookies on a side table. Strings of colorful pennants hung from the ceiling. Volunteers in yellow vests moved through the rows of folding chairs with practiced smiles and manila folders. But a child knows when a room is pretending, and Mila knew. She stood on the yellow mat near the far end of the hall, the place where children who hadn't been matched yet were asked to wait. A strip of masking tape marked the spot, and she had been standing on it for 2 hours and 14 minutes. She counted. Counting was something she had learned to do when the waiting became unbearable. It gave her somewhere to put her mind. She was 7 years old, small for her age, with dark brown hair that fell unevenly across her forehead, the kind of cut made by someone in a hurry with dull scissors. Her sweater was red, hand-me-down, stretched loose at the collar. Her jeans had a small tear above the right knee. Her shoes were clean. That had been her own doing. That morning, before the van from the group home arrived, she had scrubbed them with a damp paper towel until the scuffs were gone. If you looked neat, people looked longer. That was a theory she had tested at 4 different matching events now. It had not worked yet. Families moved through the hall with their folders and their quiet voices. Some crouched to speak to other children, the younger ones, the smiley ones, the ones who reached back. A few glanced at Mila's folder. One woman picked it up, read the first page, and set it back down without looking at her. Mila watched her walk away. She pressed her lips together until they stopped shaking. The last couple of the afternoon stopped 3 feet from her. The man wore a sport coat. The woman had a kind face. Mila straightened. She stood up taller. She tried to look like something a person could choose. The woman glanced at her file. The man whispered something. The woman nodded, and they turned, and they walked toward the coordinator's table with a different folder in hand. Not hers. The hall was beginning to empty. Volunteers collected cups and stacked chairs with a quiet, efficient sound of things ending. The event was nearly over. Mila was still on the mat. She drew in a breath through her nose, slow, steady. She had learned not to cry in front of people. Crying made adults uncomfortable. And when adults became uncomfortable, they called it difficult behavior and wrote it in the file. She had things in her file already. She looked down at the yellow tape beneath her shoes and whispered something no one was meant to hear. Or perhaps it was meant for no one at all, the kind of words a child speaks when the last door has closed and there is nothing left to lose by saying the truth out loud. Why does nobody want me? It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a performance. It was a question asked in the flattest, quietest voice, the voice of a child who had already begun to believe the answer was simply, because of you. From the back of the hall, near the doorway where the fluorescent lights buzzed and the pennants had stopped swinging, a man stood still. He had arrived 30 minutes ago and had not moved since. He wore a black coat, tailored, expensive, and entirely wrong for a community center in the north side of Chicago. A collar of ink, the edge of an elaborate tattoo, curved along the side of his neck and disappeared beneath his shirt. His eyes were dark gray, the color of a sky before a storm, and they had not left the girl on the yellow mat since the moment he walked in. His name was Dante Varro. In the streets of Chicago, people did not say that name casually. In the city's shadow economy, in the docklands and the private clubs and the offices of men who preferred that no paper trail exist, the name Varro was shorthand for the conversation is already over. He controlled shipping routes, silent partnerships, and a network of favors that stretched from the lakeshore to the suburbs and beyond. He was 38 years old and had not smiled in 3 years. He watched the girl on the yellow mat whisper her question into the empty air. And if he pursues it? Then we make sure the story about who Dante Varro is reaches every reporter in Cook County before the first hearing. Let's see how a family court judge responds when the applicant's name appears in a federal watch list. Lucinda turned back toward the glass and looked through it. Inside, Dante was sitting across from Mila at a folding table with a plate of cookies between them. He was listening to something she was saying. He hadn't opened her file yet. "He looks like he means it," Lucinda said quietly. "It doesn't matter," her father replied. "Intent doesn't pay the trust distribution. Process does. And we control the process." Lucinda watched for another moment. Then she turned and walked to her car. She had a lawyer to call, a narrative to build, and a war to prepare for. The only question that gnawed at her, the one she refused to voice aloud, was this: when the most dangerous man in Chicago knelt on a community hall floor in front of a 7-year-old girl nobody wanted, what did you do when your only weapon was paperwork? She got into her car and answered her own question. You don't fight him fairly. You fight him first. Rook was already outside when Dante emerged from the community hall at 6 in the evening. He was a large man, wide in the shoulders, quiet in a way that made rooms feel smaller, with a face that could have been carved from old wood and eyes that missed nothing. He had driven for Dante Varro for 9 years and had, in that time, learned to read the silence his employer carried like a second coat. The silence tonight was different. Rook looked past Dante's shoulder to the small girl walking 2 steps behind, clutching a canvas bag that the group home had packed with her things. It was not a large bag. He opened the rear car door without a word. Mila stopped on the sidewalk and looked at the vehicle. A black sedan, clean, expensive, nothing like the vans she was used to. She looked at Rook. Then she looked up at Dante. "Is this your car?" she asked. "Yes." "It's very clean." "Rook is particular," Dante said. Rook, to his credit, did not react. Mila climbed in carefully, sitting with her bag in her lap as if she expected someone to ask for it back. The drive to the Gold Coast took 20 minutes in evening traffic. Mila watched the city move past the windows. She did not ask where they were going. She had learned that questions about destinations often went unanswered, and she saved her questions for things that mattered. The Varro house was a brownstone townhouse, 4 stories, set back from the street behind a low iron fence and a row of carefully maintained boxwood hedges. It was the kind of house that didn't announce itself. Old Chicago money had learned the virtue of understatement. Mila stood on the steps and did not go inside. She looked up at the facade, then at the door, then at Dante. "How long am I staying?" she asked. Dante looked at her. He had been asked many questions in his life, by rivals, by lawyers, by enemies who believed that uncertainty could be weaponized. This question, asked by a 7-year-old on a front step, was the first in 3 years that he didn't immediately know how to answer. "As long as you want," he said. Mila's expression didn't change. She filed this information away the way she filed all promises, carefully, in a place where she could examine it later, in private, away from the person who had made it. "Okay," she said, and she stepped inside. The interior was clean and expensive and very quiet. Dark wood floors, high ceilings, tall windows with the curtains drawn against the evening. Everything was arranged with the kind of precision that made a space feel curated rather than lived in. There were no photographs on the main hallway walls, no coats slung over chairs, no evidence of disorder or warmth. Mila observed all of this in about 4 seconds. "Nobody else lives here?" she asked. "Just me and Rook," Dante said. "And a housekeeper who comes Tuesdays and Fridays." She nodded. Her eyes moved to the staircase, then the back hallway, then the front door behind her. Counting, measuring. Old habit. Dante showed her the room they had prepared on the 2nd floor. It was a large room by any standard. A wide bed with gray and white bedding, a desk near the window, a reading chair in the corner, a bookshelf that Rook had filled the previous afternoon with a selection from a children's bookstore, unsure of what a 7-year-old might want, and having erred generously on the side of quantity. Mila stood in the doorway and looked at the room for a long time without entering. "You can go in," Dante said. "I know," she said. But she didn't. He didn't push. He waited. After a moment, she stepped across the threshold. She moved along the wall, one hand trailing the baseboard. She checked behind the door. She looked under the bed. She opened the closet and looked inside. Then she turned and looked at Dante, as if she needed to confirm that she had his attention. "The closet has a lock," she said. "From the inside," Dante said. "You can lock it from inside if you want." She held his gaze for a moment, then she gave a single, small nod. That night, Dante walked the second-floor hallway at 11 o'clock. The house was quiet. He stopped in front of Mila's door, which was closed. A thin line of light showed under the gap at the bottom. He did not knock. He simply stood there, listening. From inside, he heard the soft, repetitive sound of something small tapping, a finger perhaps, or a pencil against a surface. And then, barely audible through the door, Mila's voice. Quiet and even, the way a child sounds when she is talking to herself to stay calm. 4 steps to the door. Window opens. Stairs are on the left. Dante stood in the dark hallway and listened to a 7-year-old rehearse her escape route. He pressed his back against the wall, closed his eyes, and remained there for a very long time. Morning came soft and gray through the Gold Coast windows. Rook had coffee ready at 7 and had placed a bowl, a carton of milk, and 3 different kinds of cereal on the kitchen table without being asked. Not because anyone had told him to, but because he had his own particular way of making space for people. Mila came downstairs at 7:15. She had dressed herself, the same red sweater, clean jeans, shoes already on. Her hair was combed. She stood in the kitchen doorway and assessed the situation. "Pick whichever you want," Rook said without turning from the stove. She chose the one in the plain box without any cartoon on the front. She poured a modest amount into the bowl, not a full serving. She ate efficiently, watching the room. When she finished, she rinsed her bowl and placed it in the drying rack. Rook turned at that point. He looked at the bowl. He looked at the girl. He did not say anything. Dante arrived at the kitchen at 7:45, suited for the day, and found them both in a state of quiet, mutual assessment. Rook at the stove and Mila standing by the window watching the street. "Sleep well?" Dante asked. "Fine," she said. "The kind of fine that means I survived." That afternoon, Dr. Petra Noel arrived. She was a child psychologist with a reputation in Chicago for working with children from high-trauma backgrounds. She was Korean-American, 43, with short black hair and a way of entering rooms that made them feel safer rather than smaller. Stellan Hart, Dante's attorney, had recommended her. "She tells the truth even when you don't want to hear it," Stellan had said, which was exactly why Dante hired her. She met Mila in the living room. She brought nothing. No clipboard, no assessment form, no toys designed to elicit emotional responses. She simply sat in an armchair, about 6 feet from Mila, and said hello. Mila sat on the sofa closest to the door and looked at her. 35 minutes passed. Petra did not fill the silence. She waited. At the 36th minute, Mila spoke. "You're not going to ask me how I feel?" "Do you want me to?" A pause. "No." "Then I won't." Mila studied her. "You're strange." "I've been told," Petra said. After the session, Petra found Dante in his study. He was standing at the window, a habit, she would learn, that he shared with the girl currently sitting in his living room. "What do you see?" he asked. Petra sat in the chair across from his desk and folded her hands. "She rations food," she said. "The cereal this morning. Rook told me. She took less than half a serving. She's not unaware of the abundance in front of her. She's afraid it will disappear. That kind of learned food insecurity doesn't come from one missed meal. That comes from months." Dante said nothing. "The sleep rehearsal, the exit count, that is dissociative self-regulation. She uses logistics to manage terror. It works, but it means she's been in situations where terror needed managing, regularly." "She was with her aunt for 11 months, Dante said. "Before that?" "Her father raised her. He died 14 months ago." Petra was quiet for a moment. Mila's file notes her as withdrawn and non-compliant. Those were the words used. "I know. Non-compliant is what frightened adults write when a child refuses to stop being frightened." Dante turned from the window. His jaw was tight, his eyes flat with something that was not quite anger yet. It was the precursor. The stillness before a storm decides what it is. How do I help her? Petra met his gaze. You already started. You didn't take the cookies away this morning. You didn't insist she eat a full bowl. You let her choose. That matters more than you know. She paused. The question isn't whether you can give her a room and food and safety, Mr. Varro. The question is whether you can be predictable, whether you can be someone whose presence means the same thing every time she sees you. Children like Mila have learned that adults are variable, that warmth comes and goes, that choosing to trust is choosing to get hurt. And if I am predictable? He asked. Then eventually, not quickly, not on command, she will stop rehearsing the exit routes, Petra said, and she will start sleeping in the bed instead of on the floor. Dante went still. How did you know about the floor? Rook told me. He found the pillow there this morning when he brought her laundry up. Dante looked back at the window. She doesn't trust the bed yet, Petra said gently. It's too open, too exposed. She needs something around her. The floor against the wall is the closest thing she has to the closet she probably used before. Dante pressed one hand flat against the window glass and looked out at the city below. She slept on floors, he said, very quietly, as if saying it too loudly would make it more real. Yes, Petra said, in the house of someone who received $12,000 a month to care for her. Yes, Petra said again. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the kind of silence that accumulates pressure, the kind that precedes an irreversible decision. Thank you, Dr. Noel, Dante said without turning around. Petra rose, collected her coat, and left. In the kitchen, Rook was cutting fruit. He had already placed a larger bowl of cereal on the counter, not for anyone in particular, just there, available, unclaimed, in case anyone wanted it. Stellenhart arrived on a Tuesday morning with a briefcase and the expression of a man who had been awake since 4 a.m. He was 51, thin, with silver-framed glasses, and the deliberate cadence of a man who chose every word the way a jeweler selects stones. Lucinda Price has filed, he said, placing the documents on Dante's desk. Dante opened the folder. Legal language in neat columns. A formal challenge to the prospective adoption application. Grounds listed: moral unsuitability of applicant, existing legal guardianship interest, concern for child welfare in light of applicant's known associations. The language is surgical, Stellan said. Her father wrote it or heavily influenced it. Bernard Gordon Price Sr., retired circuit court judge, 40 years on the bench, still has relationships with half the active judiciary. What does she want? The adoption blocked. Guardianship maintained. The trust distribution continues until the child turns 21, as long as a legal guardian remains in place. Dante leaned back in his chair. And if the girl were adopted? The trust closes to the guardian. The money goes into a restricted account solely in Mila's name, administered by an independent trustee. So Lucinda loses $12,000 a month. Approximately $144,000 a year for the next 14 years, over $2 million. Silence. She placed her in the foster system, Dante said, a month after her father died. Yes. While drawing the trust income. Every quarter. Dante rose and walked to the window. The Chicago skyline stared back at him, familiar and indifferent. Find everything there is to find on Lucinda Price, he said. Finances, relationships, CPS history, anyone who ever filed a complaint against her and had it disappear. I want to know who in the welfare system signed the paperwork that kept this quiet. Stellan made a note. There is something else. Dante turned. Vera Colt, investigative journalist from the Tribune, has been building a piece on the foster care trust fund exploitation pattern for the past 8 months. She has 3 other cases with similar structures. She has asked if she can speak with you. Not yet, Dante said, but keep her number. Stellan nodded and rose. At the door, he paused. One more thing. Lucinda's first legal move will be to request an interim order, a judge to delay the adoption process pending the full hearing. That buys her 60 to 90 days. Who hears it? Judge Alara Osei, appointed 3 years ago. Clean record, no known connection to Gordon Price Sr. Good, Dante said. After Stellan left, Dante went to the kitchen. Mila was at the table with a library book Rook had picked up, a nature encyclopedia, large format, full of photographs of animals. She was on the chapter about Arctic foxes. Dante poured a coffee and sat across from her without speaking. Mila turned a page. "Did you know Arctic foxes change color?" she said without looking up. "I didn't," Dante said. "White in winter, brown in summer." She turned another page. "So no one can see them when they don't want to be seen." Dante looked at the girl across the table, the girl who counted exit routes and slept on floors and had learned to take less than she needed so that the loss would hurt less when it came. "That's a useful skill," he said. Mila looked up at him then. Her brown eyes moved across his face, not searching for danger this time. Something else, something closer to curiosity. "Are you going to fight my aunt?" she asked. The question arrived without warning. "Yes," Dante said. She looked back at the book. "She always wins," she said. "She's very good at making people believe her." "So am I," Dante said. A pause. The pages didn't turn. "She told people my dad drank," Mila said quietly. "He didn't. She told people he was a bad father. He wasn't." Her voice was flat, emptied of emotion the way a child empties things when emotion has become too expensive. "She says things until people stop asking questions." "People are going to ask questions this time," Dante said, "and I don't stop." Mila looked at him again, studying. Something in her expression shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the edges of it, the hesitant outline. She returned to the Arctic fox. Dante drank his coffee and did not leave the table. 3 weeks after Mila arrived at the brownstone, the nightmares started. They had probably always been there. She was simply too guarded to let them surface while she was still learning the dimensions of the new space. But 3 weeks in, something had relaxed enough for her sleeping mind to unlock what the waking one had been holding at bay. Dante was in his study at 1 in the morning when he heard it. Not a scream, something worse, a low, stifled sound, the kind a child makes when they have learned that crying out loud brings punishment. Muffled, controlled, and heartbreaking. He was out of his chair and at her door in 12 seconds. He didn't enter. He knocked, softly. The sound stopped. Silence. The particular silence of a child who has frozen. "Mila, it's me. You're safe." "Nothing. I'm not coming in. I just want you to know the door's there if you want to open it." A long pause, then very slowly the sound of movement. The door opened 3 inches. One brown eye looked through the gap. Dante sat down against the hallway wall, his back to the doorframe, the way he had done with Arya years ago when the dark had frightened her. "You don't have to open it more," he said. "I'll just be out here." Another pause. The door opened further. Mila appeared in the gap, pillow hugged to her chest, hair tangled, eyes wet but expression controlled. She looked at him sitting on the floor. "Why are you on the floor?" she asked. "Same place you are," he said. She studied this for a moment. Then she came and sat against the opposite wall, mirror image, pillow held between her arms and her chest. They sat there in the darkened hallway in silence for a while. "I dreamed she came back," Mila said eventually. "Your aunt." "She was in the doorway. She said I had to go with her." "You don't." "I know, but in the dream, I believed her." Dante was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I have dreams like that too." Mila looked at him. "Someone who was taken from me," he said. "I dream that I find her in time, and then I wake up and she isn't there." Mila's hands tightened on the pillow. "Her?" "My daughter. Her name was Arya. She was 5. The hallway was very still. "What happened?" Mila asked. "I made enemies," Dante said. Being who I am in this city, it makes enemies. 3 years ago, one of them wanted to hurt me. They went after her instead. He did not say more than that. Some things didn't need more. Did you find her? Yes. But it was too late? Yes. Mila was quiet for a long time. The nightlight from her room cast a soft wedge of light into the hallway. I'm sorry, she said. Dante looked at her. 3 years of grief, sealed behind discipline and empire, and the particular armor of a man who had decided that feeling less was the same as being safe. And a 7-year-old was the first person to say, I'm sorry, and mean it, without wanting anything in return. Thank you, he said. It came out rough. Mila leaned her head back against the wall. Her eyes were still wet, but her breathing had steadied. Do you still dream about her? Every night, he said. Does it get better? Dante thought about that honestly. Different, he said. It gets different. Some nights the dream hurts. Some nights it feels like just a visit. Mila absorbed this in silence. Then she said, with the quiet certainty of a child who has decided something, Arya would have liked me. Something in Dante's chest broke quietly, the way ice breaks in spring, without sound, without violence, just the slow release of something long held rigid. She would have loved you, he said. Mila closed her eyes. Her head drooped gently to the side. In another few minutes, she was asleep against the hallway wall. Dante didn't move her. He stayed where he was, his back against the wall, keeping watch over the sleeping child in the way of a man who was beginning to understand that keeping watch was the only thing he had left to offer. When dawn came gray through the landing window, he was still there. Lucinda Price's first wave arrived the following Monday morning. The Chicago Herald ran a profile on page 4. Philanthropist fights to protect niece from city's most feared crime boss. A photograph of Lucinda at a charity gala, warm smile, pearl earrings, hand resting on a table set for a fundraising dinner. The article quoted no sources by name. It didn't need to. Phrases like alleged underworld ties and concerns raised by child welfare advocates were enough. Stellan brought the paper to Dante's desk without comment. Dante read it. He set it down. Who placed the story? A publicist connected to Gordon Price Sr.'s law firm, Stellan said. No print trail. Standard practice. Who at the Herald? Stellan named the reporter. Pull everything on him. I want to know who he talks to and what he owes. Dante tapped the paper. And contact Vera Colt. Tell her the door is open. Vera Colt arrived that Thursday. She was 41, direct, with the particular energy of a journalist who had been doing this long enough to recognize when a source was going to matter. She sat across from Dante's desk with a digital recorder that she placed on the table, openly, without asking permission. 3 cases, she said. 3 children in the Cook County foster system with active trust funds. 3 legal guardians drawing distributions while the children sit in group homes. 1 CPS supervisor involved in all 3. His name is Randall Toft. Mila is case 4, Dante said. Yes. What do you need from me? I need the financial documentation that ties Lucinda Price's income to Mila's trust disbursements, and I need it before your court date. Stellan will coordinate what we can provide legally. Vera nodded. She reached for the recorder, then paused. Can I ask you something off the record? Go ahead. Why this? You have everything you need to disappear into your money and your operations and never walk into a community hall on a Saturday. Why a 7-year-old girl nobody else stopped for? Dante looked at the recorder, then at Vera. Because I know what it looks like when a room has decided someone doesn't count, he said. And I've had enough of walking past it. Vera studied him. She picked up the recorder and put it away. I'll be in touch, she said. Lucinda's second wave came 2 weeks later. A CPS emergency review, a formal inquiry into the suitability of the prospective adoptive environment. A caseworker named Harriet Vance arrived at the brownstone with a clipboard and the air of someone who had been told what to find before she arrived. She walked through every room. She inspected the kitchen. She noted the window locks. She asked Mila several pointed questions while Dante waited in the hallway, listening. Is the man here nice to you? Harriet asked. Yes, Mila said. Does he ever make you feel scared? A pause. Dante held still. The first week I was scared, Mila said, but not of him. I was scared of a new place. He sat in the hallway so I wouldn't be alone. Harriet wrote something down. Do you feel safe here? Yes. Would you like to stay? A longer pause. Dante counted his heartbeats. Yes, Mila said. I want to stay. The review was submitted. 3 days later, Stellan notified Dante that a clerical error had resulted in the report being partially redacted before reaching the judge's desk. A senior records administrator had removed 2 pages, including Mila's direct testimony. Toft, Dante said. Likely, Stellan confirmed. Then we get the original. The third wave came the night before the hearing. Dante's phone buzzed at 11 p.m. An anonymous message. 1 line. Step back or the girl's trust is audited for irregularities. We can make the numbers say anything we want. Dante read the message twice, set the phone down, walked to the kitchen and stood at the window for a long moment. Then he went upstairs, walked past Mila's door. Light still on, quietly awake, the Arctic Fox book open on the floor where she had been reading, and stopped at the end of the hallway. A closed door, white painted wood, a small brass name plaque that read, Aria. He opened it. He stood in the center of his daughter's room and looked at the photograph on the shelf. Himself, younger, unguarded, laughing, with a small, dark-haired girl on his shoulders, arms thrown wide, face tilted up toward the sky in a state of pure happiness. I couldn't keep you safe, he said quietly, but I am not going to fail her. He returned to his phone. He called Stellan. Tomorrow, he said, whatever it takes. Cook County Courthouse, Family Division, Courtroom 11. It was standing room only by the time Judge Alara Osei entered at 9 a.m. The case had attracted attention. Not quite the volume of a criminal proceeding, but enough. Reporters occupied the back 2 rows. Advocates from 3 different child welfare organizations had filed amicus briefs. The name Varro on a family court docket was, apparently, sufficient to fill the gallery. Dante sat at the applicant's table with Stellan to his right. He wore a dark charcoal suit, no tie, collar open, a deliberate choice. He was not here to perform the role of a reformed man seeking approval. He was here to tell the truth. Across the room, Lucinda Price sat with her father's associate, Gerald Marsh, a sharp-faced attorney with 40 years of family court behind him. Lucinda wore, again, the pale blue dress, the pearl earrings. She had seated herself at a slight angle so that the gallery could see her clearly. Judge Alara Osei was 54, Nigerian-American, with a reputation for patience and an absolute intolerance for anything that wasted it. This court is concerned with one question, she said, before either side had opened their mouths. What serves the best interest of Mila? I will not deviate from that question, and I expect the parties before me to stay on it. Begin. Gerald Marsh rose. His voice was smooth, practiced, calibrated to project reasonableness. Your Honor, my client, Lucinda Price, is a woman who has devoted the last 11 months to ensuring the welfare of her niece following a devastating family tragedy. She has cooperated with every procedural requirement. She has demonstrated consistent financial support for the child's care. He paused. Mr. Dante Varro, by contrast, is an individual whose name has appeared in federal investigative records, whose known business associates include individuals with criminal convictions, and who has no prior experience with child rearing. He met Mila 18 days before filing his adoption application. He turned toward the gallery, letting the room absorb the implication. This court should ask whether it is prepared to place a 7-year-old child with an individual whose definition of problem-solving has, historically, not required paperwork. Quiet laughter, quickly suppressed by the judge's expression. Stellan rose. Your Honor, counsel's theatrical concern for proper procedures is interesting, given that we will demonstrate today that at least one procedure, a mandatory CPS report, was improperly suppressed by a records administrator with documented ties to the legal guardian's family. The room shifted. We will further demonstrate that Miss Price has received approximately $231,000 from Mila's trust fund while the child resided in a group home, sleeping on a narrow mattress and eating institutional meals. We will ask this court a simple question. What kind of guardian draws a child's inheritance while the child does not have a bookshelf? Lucinda Price was the first witness called to the stand by her own counsel. She walked slowly, sitting carefully, arranging herself in the chair with the composure of a woman who had rehearsed this. The performance was precise. Her voice broke at exactly the right moments. She spoke of her grief at losing her brother. She spoke of her own limitations as a person who had never been a mother. She invoked the difficulty of deciding to place Mila in care, the sleepless nights, the wondering. "I never stopped loving her," she said, touching the pearl at her ear with one finger. "And when you heard that Mr. Varro intended to adopt her—" "I was frightened," she said. "Every parent would be." Stellan rose. "Miss Price, in the 11 months that Mila was in the group home under your legal guardianship, how many times did you visit her?" A pause. "Several." The group home log records 4 visits in 11 months. Is that accurate? I may have visited informally. The log is signed upon entry. 4 visits are recorded. During those visits, did you bring anything for Mila? There may have been. The gift log shows 1 visit with a gift recorded, a card, purchased, according to the receipt we obtained, at a pharmacy convenience store. Stellan set the document on the table. On Mila's 6th birthday. Silence. No further questions. Vera Colt had given Stellan 3 weeks of research. CPS Supervisor Randall Toft was called. He arrived pale and defensive, knowing, based on the subpoena language, exactly what was coming. Under oath, facing documents he could not explain, he admitted that the foster care reviews for Mila, and for 2 other children in the same pattern, had been processed through a revised workflow implemented by his office. The workflow had, as a side effect, removed mandatory in-home inspection requirements for guardians with pre-existing professional credentials. And Miss Price was considered to have professional credentials because she sat on the board of the Cook County Child Welfare Advisory Council, Toft said quietly. A murmur rolled through the gallery. A council whose budget was partly overseen by her father, retired Judge Gordon Price Sr., Stellan said. That is, yes. And no one in your office thought this was a conflict. Toft looked at the table. The conflict was not raised. By anyone? No. Then Petra Noel was called. She spoke without notes, clearly, in the precise language of her field. Mila presented with food restriction behaviors, exit route mapping in new environments, disturbed sleep patterns consistent with prolonged situational anxiety, and a learned inhibition of help-seeking responses, meaning she had learned not to ask for help because help had previously not arrived. She paused. These are not personality traits. They are adaptive responses to sustained uncertainty. And in Mr. Varro's home? Over 6 weeks, food restriction has decreased significantly. She sleeps in her bed. She has begun making requests, small ones, a different kind of cereal, a particular book, which indicates she is beginning to believe that requests will be met. She has engaged in spontaneous conversation and demonstrated affection. Could you define what you mean by demonstrated affection? She holds his hand when she is uncertain, Petra said simply. She didn't do that for the first 3 weeks. Now she does it when she enters a room she doesn't know. She reaches for him. Judge Osai had not written a single note during Petra's testimony. She had simply listened, her eyes steady and attentive. Mr. Varro, she said, when Stellan indicated the applicant was prepared to testify. Take the stand. He sat in the witness chair the way he sat in every room, without deference to it. Gerald Marsh approached with the easy confidence of a man who believed he had found the weapon. Mr. Varro, How would you characterize your professional activities? Real estate, investment management, import logistics, and consulting. And your name has appeared in federal investigation records as a third-party reference in 3 investigations, none of which resulted in charges, none of which cited me as a target, and all of which are publicly accessible, Dante said. I suggest you access them. Your personal history includes associations with every businessman in this city with significant interests has associations with people who are later found to be inconvenient. If counsel would like to present documented criminal conduct, I will respond to it. Otherwise, I'll point out that he is presenting a narrative rather than evidence. Marsh shifted. You met this child 18 days before filing for adoption. Yes. Isn't that unusually fast? Mila has been waiting for 2 years. Unusually fast is relative. Do you believe you are equipped to raise a child? Dante was quiet for a moment. Not the hesitation of someone uncertain, the stillness of someone choosing carefully. I raised a child, he said. The room paused. My daughter Aria, for 5 years, until I lost her. Marsh had been told about Aria. He pressed forward anyway, because his client had instructed him to. Your daughter died due to circumstances arising from your professional activities. Is that correct? Yes, Dante said. And you believe that same environment is appropriate for Mila? Dante looked at Marsh for a long moment. Then he looked at Judge Osai. The men responsible for my daughter's death are no longer in a position to threaten anyone, he said. My operations have been restructured specifically to eliminate the categories of exposure that existed 3 years ago. Stellan Hart will submit the documentation. That is your word. It is also 6,000 pages of legal filings, 2 independent audits, and the signed testimony of a federal compliance officer retained at my expense, Dante said. Your Honor, those documents were submitted this morning. Judge Osei glanced at her clerk, who nodded. I've reviewed the relevant sections, she said to Marsh. Move on. Marsh regrouped. Mr. Varro, are you doing this out of guilt? For your daughter? The question was designed to destabilize, to make him seem like a man replacing a loss rather than making a choice. Dante looked at the gallery for the first time, at the reporters with their notebooks, at the advocates with their expressions of cautious judgment. Then he looked at the empty chair where Mila was not sitting because she was too young to attend. I'm doing this because she stood on a yellow mat in a community hall for 2 hours and 14 minutes while families walked past her and didn't stop, Dante said. And then she looked at the floor and asked a question she believed no one would answer. The gallery was very quiet. And I'm doing this because no child should ever be the answer to a question nobody asked. Mila is not a replacement. She's not a project. She's not a second attempt at something I failed. He paused. She is a person who deserved to be chosen, and she is still waiting for someone to mean it. So mean it, he said. Marsh had nothing to follow that with. No further questions, he said. Judge Alara Osei took a recess of 45 minutes. When she returned, the gallery had refilled. Reporters had fresh notebooks open. Lucinda Price sat rigid, her pearls still in place, her composure rebuilt to its prior precision, but her hands were flat on the table, pressing down, as if keeping something from escaping. The judge settled her papers and looked at both tables. I will be direct, she said. This court has heard testimony from a psychologist, a records administrator, and 2 parties. We have reviewed financial documentation, CPS records, including the 2 pages that were incorrectly redacted and have since been obtained through court order, and the documentation submitted this morning regarding Mr. Varro's compliance restructuring. She paused. The question before this court is not whether Dante Varro is a conventional applicant. He is not. The question is, what serves Mila? She looked at Lucinda. Miss Price, the record shows that in 11 months of legal guardianship, you visited your niece 4 times. You received $231,000 from a trust established specifically to provide for that child's welfare and comfort. In that same period, Mila slept in a group home bed that was not her own, owned no books, and had, according to Dr. Noel, developed trauma-adaptive behaviors consistent with environments of sustained neglect. Lucinda's jaw tightened. "That is not guardianship," Judge Osei said. "That is administration." She turned to Dante. "Mr. Varro, you are not a conventional applicant. Your history carries weight that this court does not dismiss. But the law does not require perfection. The law requires demonstrated commitment, material suitability, and, above all, the best interest of the child. The testimony of Dr. Noel, the submitted documentation, and the record of your conduct over the 6 weeks Mila has been in your home all point in one direction." She lifted the gavel. "Permanent custody is granted to Dante Varro. Lucinda Price's guardianship is formally dissolved as of today. The trust distribution is suspended pending an audit by the court-appointed financial officer. The Cook County Family Services Department is directed to initiate a full review of the practices described in today's proceedings, including the role of Randall Toft." The gallery erupted. Reporters were already on their phones. Lucinda Price stood very still for 3 seconds, as if waiting for the world to correct itself. Then she turned to her attorney, her voice low and stripped of all performance. "Appeal," she said. Gerald Marsh looked at the table. "On what grounds?" She didn't answer. Because there weren't any. The mask had slipped in front of the court 2 weeks ago when she had authorized a message threatening to manufacture financial irregularities in a child's trust. Stellan Hart had that message. It was already in a sealed filing. Lucinda Price walked out of the courtroom without another word. Dante sat at the table until the gallery had mostly cleared. Stellan gathered the documents beside him, quiet and efficient. "She may appeal informally," Stellan said. "Try to find a sympathetic ear." "She'll find that her father's connections have grown suddenly less warm," Dante said. Stellan looked at him. "How?" "Vera Colt's piece runs tomorrow. All 4 cases. Gordon Price Sr.'s name is in the 3rd paragraph." Stellan allowed himself a rare, minimal smile. "You coordinated the timing." "I made a phone call," Dante said. He rose and straightened his coat. "Let's go home." The black sedan pulled up to the brownstone just before 2 in the afternoon. Rook had driven. Stellan had taken a separate car. Dante sat in the back in the silence of a man who has just set something down that he had been carrying for a very long time. He got out and walked up the front steps. The door opened before he reached it. Mila stood in the doorway, red sweater, jeans, hair in a crooked braid that she had evidently attempted herself and partially succeeded at. Petra Noel stood a few feet behind her. They had spent the morning together while the hearing ran. Mila looked at Dante's face. She was learning to read him. 6 weeks of watching, cataloging, measuring the difference between expressions that meant everything was fine and expressions that meant something had happened. She was getting good at it. "You won," she said. Not a question. "Yes," he said. Her face moved. Not dramatically. Mila didn't do things dramatically, but her eyes changed. The tight, constant watchfulness loosened, just slightly, like a fist that has been clenched for so long the owner has forgotten it is a fist until the moment it opens. "For good?" she asked. "For good." Mila looked at the step, then up at him. Then she stepped down off the threshold, crossed the distance between them, and held out her hand. Not to be let inside, not because she was frightened. She held it out the way she had started doing these past 2 weeks, the quiet reach for contact when the world felt like it needed a point of stability. Dante took her hand. "For good," he said again. They went inside together. Rook had made lunch, something warm, substantial, the kind of meal that announced itself through the whole house. The table was set. There was juice in a glass next to Mila's bowl without anyone having specified that she wanted juice. She ate a full serving. She didn't save anything for later. That night at 10 p.m., Dante was in his study when he heard footsteps on the landing. Mila appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, the Arctic Fox book under one arm. "Can I read in here?" she asked. "I don't want to be by myself." "Take the chair," Dante said. She curled up in the reading chair in the corner of his study and opened the book. Dante returned to his papers. The study filled with the comfortable quiet of two people who no longer needed to announce their presence to feel secure in it. At some point, the footsteps slowed. The pages stopped turning. Dante looked up. Mila was asleep in the chair, the book open to a photograph of a white fox in a snowfield, face tilted slightly toward the desk lamp. He rose, crossed the room, and placed the folded throw blanket from the arm of the sofa over her. He stood there for a moment. This man who had controlled a city and lost the thing that mattered most, and had spent 3 years wondering whether the loss had hollowed him out past the point of use. He looked at the sleeping girl and understood that it hadn't. He went back to his papers and left the desk lamp on. The brownstone had been changed by small hands. There were fingerprints on the lower window glass that Rook wiped off with theatrical exasperation every Thursday and that reappeared by Saturday. There was an elaborate wall of drawings pinned in the study, Mila's, accumulated over 2 years of Saturday mornings spent at the desk with colored pencils while Dante worked nearby. Some were animals. Several were Arctic foxes. One was a careful portrait of a man in a dark coat with ink on his neck, rendered with the serious artistic ambition of an 11-year-old. Dante had framed it. Mila was 11 now, taller, assured, with the particular confidence of a child who has been seen consistently enough to believe that being seen is normal. She laughed freely. She argued her corner with a precision that made Stellan Hart, who had met her twice at the office, quietly comment that she would make a terrifying attorney. She no longer counted exits when she entered rooms. She had stopped sleeping on the floor in the 3rd month. The Arctic Fox book had been joined by 37 others, and the bookshelf Rook had filled that first afternoon had been supplemented by 2 more. On a Sunday afternoon in late October, Dante and Mila sat in the kitchen with a chessboard between them. Mila had been learning for a year. She was close to winning her 3rd game. She moved a bishop. Dante studied the board. "You're trying to distract me," he said. "I'm trying to win," she said. "It's not my fault you're distractible." Rook, at the counter, did not react. The black sedan pulled up to the brownstone just before 2 in the afternoon. Rook had driven. Stellan had taken a separate car. Dante sat in the back, in the silence of a man who has just set something down that he had been carrying for a very long time. He got out and walked up the front steps. The door opened before he reached it. Mila stood in the doorway, red sweater, jeans, hair in a crooked braid that she had evidently attempted herself and partially succeeded at. Petra Noel stood a few feet behind her. They had spent the morning together while the hearing ran. Mila looked at Dante's face. She was learning to read him. 6 weeks of watching, cataloging, measuring the difference between expressions that meant everything was fine and expressions that meant something had happened. She was getting good at it. "You won," she said, not a question. "Yes," he said. Her face moved, not dramatically. Mila didn't do things dramatically, but her eyes changed. The tight, constant watchfulness loosened, just slightly, like a fist that has been clenched for so long the owner has forgotten it is a fist until the moment it opens. "For good?" she asked. "For good." Mila looked at the step, then up at him. Then she stepped down off the threshold, crossed the distance between them, and held out her hand. Not to be let inside, not because she was frightened. She held it out the way she had started doing these past 2 weeks, the quiet reach for contact when the world felt like it needed a point of stability. Dante took her hand. "For good," he said again. They went inside together. Rook had made lunch, something warm, substantial, the kind of meal that announced itself through the whole house. The table was set. There was juice in a glass next to Mila's bowl without anyone having specified that she wanted juice. She ate a full serving. She didn't save anything for later. That night, at 10 p.m., Dante was in his study when he heard footsteps on the landing. Mila appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, the Arctic Fox book under one arm. "Can I read in here?" she asked. "I don't want to be by myself." "Take the chair," Dante said. She curled up in the reading chair in the corner of his study and opened the book. Dante returned to his papers, the study filled with the comfortable quiet of two people who no longer needed to announce their presence to feel secure in it. At some point, the footsteps slowed. The pages stopped turning. Dante looked up. Mila was asleep in the chair, the book open to a photograph of a white fox in a snowfield, face tilted slightly toward the desk lamp. He rose, crossed the room, and placed the folded throw blanket from the arm of the sofa over her. He stood there for a moment. This man who had controlled a city and lost the thing that mattered most, and had spent 3 years wondering whether the loss had hollowed him out past the point of use. He looked at the sleeping girl and understood that it hadn't. He went back to his papers and left the desk lamp on. The brownstone had been changed by small hands. There were fingerprints on the lower window glass that Rook wiped off with theatrical exasperation every Thursday and that reappeared by Saturday. There was an elaborate wall of drawings pinned in the study, Mila's, accumulated over 2 years of Saturday mornings spent at the desk with colored pencils while Dante worked nearby. Some were animals. Several were Arctic foxes. One was a careful portrait of a man in a dark coat with ink on his neck, rendered with the serious artistic ambition of an 11-year-old. Dante had framed it. Mila was 11 now, taller, assured, with the particular confidence of a child who has been seen consistently enough to believe that being seen is normal. She laughed freely. She argued her corner with a precision that made Stellan Hart, who had met her twice at the office, quietly comment that she would make a terrifying attorney. She no longer counted exits when she entered rooms. She had stopped sleeping on the floor in the 3rd month. The Arctic Fox book had been joined by 37 others, and the bookshelf Rook had filled that first afternoon had been supplemented by 2 more. On a Sunday afternoon in late October, Dante and Mila sat in the kitchen with a chessboard between them. Mila had been learning for a year. She was close to winning her 3rd game. She moved a bishop. Dante studied the board. "You're trying to distract me," he said. "I'm trying to win," she said. "It's not my fault you're distractible." Rook, at the counter, did not react. He watched Mila sit quietly beside a frightened child in a corner of a community hall. He watched the girl's shoulders gradually, millimeter by millimeter, release their tension. He watched, after about 10 minutes, the girl's arms loosen from around her knees, and one small hand reach down and touch Mila's shoulder, tentatively, as if testing whether contact was allowed. Mila didn't move. She just stayed. Rook appeared beside Dante. He said nothing. He looked at the same scene, and then he looked at Dante, and if he was feeling something, he had the particular grace not to name it in front of anyone. Dante turned toward the window. 3 years ago, he had gone to a matching event on a cold Saturday because the alternative was another night in a silent house on the Gold Coast, sitting in front of a closed door at the end of a hallway, carrying a weight that was crushing him from the inside out. He had found a girl nobody had stopped for, and she had, without knowing it, handed him back the thing he thought was gone. Not Arya, never that. Arya was irreplaceable and permanent, and the shape of her absence lived in him like architecture. But the ability to be present, the ability to wake up in the morning and move towards something rather than away from everything. Later, when the activities had finished and the children were being returned to the vans, Mila came to stand beside him. "Her name is Zoe," she said. "She's been to 3 matching events." Dante looked at her. "She told me," Mila said. "Eventually." He looked across the room to where the girl named Zoe was being helped into her coat by a volunteer. She looked back at the room once before leaving, the way children look back when they are hoping something in the room has changed, and they want to know if they can take it with them. "What do you want to do?" Dante asked. Mila looked at her father, at the man who had knelt on a community hall floor for her, at the man who had sat in hallways all night so she would know someone was there, at the man who had burned down the legal machinery of an entire fraudulent guardianship system because a child deserved a bookshelf. "The same thing you did," she said. Dante looked at his daughter. The daughter nobody had wanted. The daughter who had taught him that survival and healing were not the same thing, and that choosing to stay, really stay, fully, without armor, was the bravest act a person could perform. "Then let's start the paperwork," he said. And the brownstone on the Gold Coast, the house that had been a museum, that had learned to laugh, that had a wall of drawings and a chess set and a shelf of Arctic fox books, made room for one more. The porch light at the Varro house stayed on every night, not as a warning, not as a declaration, simply as a fact. Someone is here, someone is waiting, and if you need to come in from the dark, the door is there. That is enough. That has always been enough.